Hey, hello, I'm Wren Ribeiro, and I want to connect with you about peace and justice. We are interviewing women who labor for peace, as we have forever and always will, until we all feel peace in our homes, our workplaces, our communities, and especially our bodies and minds. This initiative is named Mujeres Co-Labor for Peace. It's a show of intimate conversations with justice workers who are healing their self and communities from the effects of misogyny, capitalism, and climate change. Welcome to the show. My name is Wren Ribeiro, and I wish you complete wellness and lasting peace. In this episode of Mujeres Co-Labor for Peace, we're exploring capitalism from the vibrant perspective of cooperation as a formal business structure with deep values baked into the bylaws. It is a wonderful topic, and we've got two leaders joining us for episode 8, which is a continuation of the intimate conversation about democracy and social justice. Our guests, Emily Kawano from the Wellspring Cooperative and the Massachusetts Solidarity Economy Network, and Sarah Assefa from the Coalition of Worker Ownership and Power and the Dorchester Food Cooperative, gave us so much rich content in episode 7 that we're continuing into episode 8. But before we jump back in, let's take a moment to check in with our hearts and take a deep breath of awareness. In this moment, my heart is feeling a little quiet, slow and steady, and perfectly fine. How is your heart? Wonderful. Now let's get back to the conversation about the possibilities and tensions in the alliance building efforts with worker-owned cooperatives and labor unions.
Yeah, I think you're right that there's momentum there. That being said, I mean, maybe there will be like an exponential turning towards each other, but it's been there for quite a long time. If you remember, the steelworkers announced a long time ago, 10 years at least ago, right, this partnership with Mondragon to develop co-ops, worker-owned co-ops. A lot of them were to be conversions. And that's just been a really slow process. I believe, as far as I know, there were a couple attempts and startups that didn't pan out in the end. The one that's still standing that I know of is Works in Worcester. So yay, hooray for them. But I also think it's really important to do some assessment. Like why after 10 plus years, why has there been so little fruition? I think it would be really interesting to know. And there are other unions as well that have been working on co-ops. And it's a slow process, and there are lots of other battles to be fought. So I think it's really, really encouraging and really exciting. At the same time, it's a slow process from what I've seen. And I think for us to kind of understand what are the challenges would be helpful. Yeah.
Let's take a deep breath and hold the potential of these partnerships and the pace to kind of meet the urgencies. Let's meet each other in really good ways so that the steps unfold the way that is in right relationship to each other and the work and the planet and all of these things. It's, I feel it as a spiritual kind of thing when the resonance is right. It's not work, it's labor, and the labor of resonance of inspiration and growth collectively. I'm kind of working on a new definition of labor for myself, as opposed to work that's drudgery and it's it's like this the grind culture that we're part of, and the labor feels like it just has this generativeness. So let's take a breath and hold that vision together. Oh, so I wonder if each of you have any questions for each other, that may be bubbling up at the moment before we get into the next prompt. I'm really glad you brought up the land trusts, Emily, because I've been curious about it. I've been kind of like watching from afar and have a sense of the potential liberation through the land trusts model. There's no way of like holding land that's not in ownership in a capitalist way at the very moment, but it's as close as I think we can get at the moment as a vehicle for bringing people together in right relationship to the land. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And Sarah, I'm super glad that you brought up the Dorchester Food Co-op and the food sovereignty and the sovereignty of workers. Those two things to me feel so alive, and I want to insert myself in ways, but I'm one human being and I don't know how to split myself in time to like do the things that I want to labor on, aside from this particular show at the moment. If I were to do anything, it would be getting my hands in the soil and working with people. That's not my skill set at the moment, but that feels like the most beautiful thing that we can do, given the state of soil and the state of food and access and so forth.
It's really, really important. I remember last year a conversation with some of the folks from Rising to Own It, aspiring worker owners and worker owners from across Massachusetts. And people were talking about psychological safety a lot. And what is psychological safety? Like, to be an entrepreneur, you got to have all kinds of things like access to housing and health. And like, we want to see a cooperative economy, but it needs to be holistic. And one of a neighbor of mine just moved to the next town over because Boston's too expensive, and he's an amazing worker owner from Boston. It's like, your commute is longer now because we haven't figured out the whole housing bit. So anyways, like, how can we all feel like, yeah, this is my town without it having to be only your town? How could it be our town? Yeah. So I say, I love this song, "This land is your land, this land is my land." And we started singing, "This town is your town, this town is my town." Oh, sweet. And then I used to sing, "This land is my land, your land is my land." And I think he was talking about our settler colonialism. Anyways, so many land issues we all have to learn a lot more about. I'm really excited that TOPA has a chance, the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase. I know it got through both sides of the legislature.
The House and Senate. So
in the past, and then it stopped with the governor before. Okay. But now we have a progressive governor, so we have a chance. I just was scrolling through the interwebs and the social medias this morning, and I saw something about a trailer park in Newton that has been taken over by a corporation that's jacking up the rent every year. And it's like, But in Washington State, they managed to get TOPA, Tenant Opportunity to Purchase, for trailer parks. And it has just sort of allowed people to collectively, cooperatively preserve a whole ownership class in society, which is so important. Like, that house is like the foundation for all of our dreams. And this is our town. How do we make this town work for all of us?
And this is our planet, right? And if we're all saying, "Oh, the decisions I make matter to the whole planet," and it's all of our planet, right? So all of those things they matter. And if we can all collectively co-agitate, then it doesn't feel like such a personal burden. It's a, many hands kind of thing. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in with just some of the tensions, right, around creating more thriving community. So again, I'm going to use the example of where my ceramic studio is. There's this whole vision of kind of building on a little bit, replicating what's going on in Easthampton. So Easthampton was also a very, very much a deindustrialized, very, very struggling city. And it's been revitalized through the arts, right? There's these great big mill buildings, and there's all kinds of interesting things in there. And it's an interesting town now. There's interesting stuff and beautiful restaurants and all this, but there has been gentrification.
Absolutely.
And so when in the town of Ware, when we were talking about this at our studio, and people were all excited about, there's a possibility of really bringing, using arts or bringing arts to the fore in this little town, and connecting with Easthampton, the town manager and planner, and learning those lessons. The question is, can you do it without displacing? And do people actually want to do it without displacing, right? There are some people that would argue, oh, we want that displacement, right? Like, so there are people that are really, really low income, and there are some people that are like, let's kind of shove them out of town. That's how we're going to get like market rate housing, and that's how we're going to get a nice, shiny little town. Those are hard conversations. And when you're talking to maybe folks who are looking for a little bit of a step up, it's hard sometimes to make these arguments, Mm-hmm. So those are some of the tensions. I
appreciate you bringing it up.
Lots of contradictions. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're realities, right? They're real truths, hard truths, and hard conversations can't be had without some skill and some structure and some heart, and I'm wondering, for me, when I think about my experiences in capitalism for typical corporations versus worker-owned spaces, the values, the way the values are written into accountability measures, and how we're holding each other accountable to the explicit values that we're all trying to uphold. That is the kind of skill building that could undergird some of these harder conversations, and up at a pace that is in right relationship to all diverging positions or people at the table, or all stakeholders that are part of the conversation. Just thinking about how some of these housing, the condos in Easthampton that you were referencing, they start at $650,000 for a tiny space. Some of them don't even have windows. Like, that to me is the epitome of gentrification. Yeah. And I know the mill, the industrial town that you're talking about, and I'm like, how do we stop that from happening? How do we have these conversations?
Or do we have do we have that right? Like, so there would be some people that are probably really struggling that might benefit, right? So housing prices go up. If they're a homeowner, the renters are not going to benefit. But if they're a homeowner, they may well, right? Even if it means they get displaced, they get to sell their house, right? They build up some assets and wealth. Like, so who's to say, right? There are people that have been left out of prosperity, and this is their shot. Possibly. Who are we to say, right? Like, no, no, we're invested in permanently affordable housing. And it's a hard conversation when you're working in these struggling communities. So this is a general observation, right? Whether it's Springfield or Holyoke or where.
Dorchester. Yeah.
Exactly. It's hard to say, oh, we want to bring in these values of greater equity and opportunity for everybody. But that means, oh, you don't get to flip your house now that there's gentrification and finally get your little nest egg, right? Like, it's interesting, right?
Go ahead, please,
Yeah,
Sarah.
I'm thinking about that a lot in Dorchester and Roxbury as well. And yeah, I mean, it's a symptom of the system that we set up, which is capitalism. Like, like some of the progressive projects that we have happening, the biggest, breaks are elder homeowners. And it's because their house is their primary wealth that's going to take care of them when they're old, because that's our system here.
Right.
In other communities, it might be the solidarity economy of family care, which has its ups and downs too. But, like we got to socialize elder care and make it awesome. And so that people don't feel like they have to squeeze their neighbors to have a future.
Right.
And so we think about this a lot with the Dorchester Food Co-op a lot. We want this to be a community asset, to build wealth and not to create divestment for the people who need it most. Like if we want to be about food justice, food security, food sovereignty, gentrification is not that. Kicking people out, making their own communities more unaffordable is not what it's about. So, grappling with this in a really serious way, there's some people who've been thinking long and hard about this. Like Darnell Adams, one of the earlier co-op organizers of the place, who has an amazing CDI live about gentrification and food co-ops. And
can you say that?
I was also talking
CDI live. What is that?
Oh,
the Cooperative Development Institute. Is that what you're referring to?
I think so, but maybe I have it wrong. Maybe it's CFI.
Oh, okay.
Food Co-op Initiative, FCI live.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
so check it out.
But sometimes, like food co-ops, in some cases, are characterized as the thin edge of gentrification, right? It's a signal to like cool, progressive people that this is an up and coming neighborhood, right? And so it can be part of that, unless you're careful, right? And you start working on some of the other structural things like preventing gentrification and skyrocketing housing and rental prices. If you're not doing that, then a food co-op, yeah, it's great. But yeah, if you look at the larger impact that it's possibly contributing towards, anyway, complicated.
Yeah, right. It's very complicated, and we talk about this a lot. The one solution I've heard from Boone is that it would not cause gentrification if the food co-op was on a community land trust. Yeah.
Or if there is it doesn't mean that the food co-op needs to be part of, but if there is a community land trust that's protecting the affordable housing, yeah, that would be a solution for sure. Yeah. But how often does that happen, right? Like those aren't partnered up things, right? I mean, just in general, solidarity economy can be accused of that, right? That various kinds of solidarity economy initiatives, food co-ops or groovy, community gardening or any number of nice projects that we would embrace could be sort of that thin edge of gentrification. And without joining it up and thinking about how to protect affordable housing, yeah. And then it's also like trying to introduce that in towns that are completely unfamiliar with any of these concepts whatsoever.
Oh my gosh, right. There's so much education to do.
It's hard. It's hard and it's awkward, but important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I have a question for both of you on the tip of my tongue, and it's like I'm so into the words that we're sharing here that it's kind of flowing around. I guess I'll come back to it in a minute. Well, I guess I'll share with you the image that I'm having because I can see that a lot more clearly in my mind about how the pieces can come together but not meet, like or the pieces can be like so ready. Like we've got these Nuestros Raíces, we've got Riquezas del Campo. We've got some wonderful food growers in Western Massachusetts anyway. I'm not sure about Dorchester or the Boston area as much. I'm not as familiar. We've got all these wonderful things, and then we've got all these community gardens, and we've got like things that are happening, but how do we weave them together? So my question is for both of you is like, to what extent, as a coalition of worker ownership and power, or as an incubator of cooperatives, do either of you feel like able and to bring in more mainstream people to hold that, maybe not mainstream people, but more resources, more people, build a bigger movement around reinforcing and weaving those connections, while you're doing all the other 5 points of the mission, or like wrangling in-person events to make sure that we're representative of the voice of the worker ownership movement in Massachusetts anyway. So that's a question of like resource building. It's the just transition, right? Where are the edges of that in both of your spaces?
Yeah, I can start. When I think about this kind of multifaceted CLTs, leveraging CLTs to build local solidarity economy ecosystems, I think that we've recognized that there are kind of two legs to stand on. One, there are opportunities, properties that are coming, that are available, various kinds of partnership, and that lends a certain urgency to move on those opportunities. And the other is recognizing that building that community engagement and take up and buy-in is really, really, really important. So I feel like in Holyoke Springfield, we're trying to walk on both legs, right? There's a number of concrete possibilities that we're working on and exploring. At the same time, doing those community meetings, trying to do a lot of both consultation and harvest people's input, but also because people are not already familiar with a lot of these models, also do some education around them, right? Like, to me, one of the challenging maxims that we throw around on the left a lot is it all has to be community led. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, it's all going to be led by X, Y, or Z particular identity, right? Mm-hmm. I think part of leadership is also providing things that people don't know. People don't know many things. They don't know what is a co-op. They don't know what is a CLT. They don't X, Y, and Z, right? They're like, what you eat and breathe in this society is a capitalist vision. Therefore, it's not surprising they don't know alternatives, right? So I think it is, yes, you need that community leadership, but you also need to bring in new information and the possibility. And then it's up to the community as to what they want to engage in. But so that also is trying to do that in an authentic and a real way is also, it's a long process. Yeah.
Yeah. And thanks for doing it.
Yeah.
Sarah, your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot we don't know. There's also a lot we do know. We forget that we know. Like, there's so much in our cultures of cooperation that just comes so naturally to us. And yeah, we're sort of in this capitalist Kool-Aid that says that, competition is the way, but, it's also, our ability to cooperate that makes us, with small teeth and wobbly legs, able to be. I love the question you're asking. Earlier, we were talking about democratic control over the fragile systems upon which our lives depend. And so this sort of brings us to value chains, supply chains. The value chain approach, I think, is really interesting. When you look at everything, all the goods and services that we need from production to consumption, as far as possible, if we can make those chains short so that we are making as much as we can, like Emily was talking about, these community production centers that you were talking about, Claire Evans, Center for Community Production. Very cool. Mm-hmm. So making that as short and local and sustainable as possible and as community controlled as possible instead of corporate controlled is powerful and important. And also just looking at all the value chains for everything we depend on, whether it's internet services or food, like, who are the actors who are touching and exchanging these goods and services as they make their way to us. Where at each of those nodes is there an opportunity for more democratic community control? More, not only, but more. And so studying that is super interesting, and there's a lot of scope for making a difference there. You're talking about tightening up the connections between various types of food production and in the state and food consumption, and in a broader geography too, bioregionally. And so looking at those actors, often business players, and seeing where we have common interest, where we can tighten up the slack, where we can share information to make sure that these patterns, these flows of resources and services suit us as much as possible, and we can make sure that we're voting our conscience with our dollars, our conscience. And then there's this extended value chain within which these flows exist. So this is like social norms and policy, and all of that's important. So the value chain approach, I think, is super helpful for helping to connect those dots, even if it's not actually that now we know each other. Somebody in Easthampton is going to feed me in Dorchester something, but like we can connect with ideas. We can connect, it might be materially. We can put our power together in business, et cetera. So I'm excited about local supply chains, cooperative supply chains. Would love to join hands with everybody who wants to look at connecting those dots a little bit more.
Yeah. And just people join coalitions, know that you can plug in because there's a need, and there's structures to hold people's enthusiasm for making a difference. Wellspring, absolutely. There's ways to plug into community groups that you can say, hey, I've got things for you to do. If you've got time and energy and will and inspiration to come help, there's more than enough for you to do. And the Coalition of Worker Ownership and Power, for sure. Like, what's your thought? Like, come in and ask questions and meet people and grow the cooperative space. There's so many ways to help out there. I'm noticing we're at time, and I want to take a deep breath with you of appreciation. And I also want to say that there are constant victories to celebrate. Sarah, I know you do an amazing job of that. And Emily, you hold spaces for celebration that have been very gratifying for me to participate in, and I'm sure for everyone. But even if the justice victories can seem far off and few and far between, particularly legislatively, sometimes it's the pace of cooperative movements is I feel unstoppable. There's just too much rightness in it and too many wrongs to heal to not continually grow the cooperative spaces, the worker ownership, all the justice work that the left, at least that we align with, are intent on doing. So I'll close by saying that community that begins with deep respect and curiosity for that which emerges through one another, community that understands its interdependence on other healthy ecosystems, is what the cooperative sector is all about. I put this other piece here that I want to read, and it feels really important in the light of cancel culture and some wonderful humans that have been suffering, and the revolution that's building around that. Do we have the courage to want all women to experience power? What do we believe about powerful women? We've got a couple here who are amazing, and I'm so glad you've joined Mujeres Co-Labor for Peace today. And I wish you so much goodness in your movement building. So join me for more of the conversation about healing from the effects of capitalism next time in part 3 on Mujeres Co-Labor for Peace. I am Wren Ribeiro, and I thank you for joining.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
You as well.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This initiative is supported by Inner Fortune, the full-life self-coaching journal that is now digital. Join us for peace, and thank you for your heart.